Hello and welcome to the Voice of Liberty podcast. My name is Henry Conley. Always glad to have you here. Tonight, I want to talk about creating a cult. And I want to talk about creating a cult for a reason. Anybody that watches a multitude of my podcast episodes knows that I call Trump's followers a cult. I call his supporters a cult. And I don't do that without valid reasoning. I don't do that without having thought through this and determined why it's appropriate to call them a cult. I do that because I have actually looked into what equates his support base with a cult. To do this, I got to break down some interesting little facts about Trump and his support base and cults and how all of these things go together. So, of course, the first thing I got to talk about is the qualities of a cult leader. Because without knowing the qualities of a cult leader, you cannot begin to equate Trump with a cult. So the qualities of a cult leader. Generally, they have a narcissistic personality. They're extremely needy of adoration. Generally, they're emotionally weak or emotionally frail. They generally elevate themselves to the status of a god. Man, it's already sounding like Trump. See, the first thing I put on there was narcissistic. And the reason I put that at the top is because anybody with a functioning brain looks at Trump and realizes that he is a narcissist. In fact, if you go into the primaries leading up to Trump winning the nomination from the Republican Party, there were those within the Republican Party that named him as a narcissist. There are former Trump allies and friends that call him a narcissist. You keep on going, extremely needing of adoration. I mean, that goes without saying. You can see it in everything that Trump does, from his cabinet picks to how he runs the country. He holds rallies where he doesn't espouse new ideas. All he is doing is seeking the applause and the fanfare of his generous supporters. Emotionally frail and weak, that goes in with the needing of adoration and elevating themselves to the status of a god. Well, specifically when referring to Trump, he didn't have to elevate himself to the status of a god. His supporters did it for him. See, Trump, what he did was he played the perfect Christian. Trump had roughly 81% of the evangelical vote. Despite not being a Christian, despite going against everything they believe in, they flocked to him. They said that he was appointed by God. They said that he was appointed by the Creator, in their opinion. They elevated him to a god. He just continued with it. And how'd he continue with it? Well, it was simple. He claims he's the greatest president in the United States history. That he's done more than any other president in the history of the United States. He himself elevated himself to the status of a god. Going on, though, because, of course, we have to talk about how Trump has created a cult. And how did he create a cult? It's super simple. Let's first talk about who cults target. Research has shown that those who are susceptible to recruitment are stressed, emotionally vulnerable, have tenuous or no family connections, and are living in adverse socioeconomic conditions. Let's equate that with what Trump speaks on and what his supporters generally say. Immigrants are coming for our jobs. Immigrants are taking over this country. Immigrants are trying to change our country. They're trying to change us. They're trying to change America. Your job, it was outsourced to foreign nations. Political enemies want me to fail. Political enemies want you to fail. Trump the other day, he retweeted a photo that of him sitting that roughly said, "They're not coming for me, they're coming for you. I'm just standing in the way," emphasizing that political enemy coming after you. See, the people that are his base are people that have been vulnerable to this type of rhetoric for years. They were vulnerable to this rhetoric under the Bush administration, under the Obama administration. Hell, it goes back to Clinton. It goes back beyond that. The base that he so loves is literally super vulnerable. The base he so loves has already put their family connections in an immense strain. The base he so loves lives in an adverse socioeconomic condition. The majority of Trump's base account for a large amount of the welfare that this country spends. But Trump is able to flip it. See, that same base who largely uses welfare, white Southerners, also is horrendously afraid of immigrants. They're afraid of their jobs being outsourced to another country. They're afraid of political outsiders changing their way of life. Trump was able to capitalize on that. And therefore, the seeds to a cult were planted. It goes beyond that, though. See, cults have some major characteristics to them. One of them is something called love bombing. Love bombing is just how it sounds. Love bombing is when a cult embraces a person, their thought process, their ideology, and their very being, and uses it to draw them further and further into the cult. Love bombing is when a cult ensures that the person feels reassured and reaffirmed in their beliefs. The cult uses this to draw them in. This is the first level of entering a cult, where you're love bombed. See, having identified a stressed, emotionally vulnerable target, the cult now can take over. So what happens with Trump's followers? Okay, the stressed, emotionally vulnerable target. What we're talking about are the people who are in a socioeconomic state that they cannot draw themselves out of. These people have been convinced by the party that the reason they cannot draw themselves out of this state is because immigrants have flooded this country and put them in a situation where they cannot drag themselves out of here, ignoring the fact that trickle-down economics does not work. See, the cult uses this hatred that just has not been perfectly formed of immigrants to draw them in. See, these people who are in this socioeconomic state, they don't realize that they hate immigrants. Some of them do, but most did not. Until Trump started talking about how immigrants are the cause of their problems, how immigrants are the cause of their socioeconomic state. Suddenly, immigrants became his target. Suddenly, the cult was sucked in by this. Build the wall. For everyone else looking from the outside in, we went, how is a wall going to defend against this? But to his cult's mind, a wall made sense. It kept the immigrants out. It kept the immigrants from coming in and gave them the chance to drag themselves out of this socioeconomic state. What else did he do? He targeted those who they have been taught to hate. Muslims. See, the base that Trump so craves and so uses is a base that has been taught that every Muslim man and woman is bad. Muslim men are terrorists. Muslim women are terrorists. Ignoring the fact that most Muslim men and women are fantastically peaceful people. But see, they were taught to hate them because 9/11 taught them to hate them. They were taught to hate them because they were the ones killing American soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq. So Trump immediately went on the ban of Muslim travel, or Muslims traveling here. He went on the Muslim ban, which immediately fueled his base. See, these things were love and compassion spread out amongst his base. And these things made his base feel like their thoughts and their emotions were fine. We go to the next step in a cult: isolation. Now, isolation varies based upon the cult. Isolation in traditional cult talk could be something like Waco, where they isolated themselves in their own home. Isolation could be something like the Hale-Bopp comic cult, where they isolated themselves in a house. Isolation could be Jonestown. But the isolation I'm talking about right here with Trump and his cult is actually a very different isolation. It's an isolation that isn't seen often when you're talking about cults, and that isolation is isolating them from the media, isolating them from the news, isolating them from friends and family, isolating them from those who are not chosen. See, Trump started this isolation very early on by proclaiming fake news. It wasn't a off-canter tagline, but rather a very carefully coordinated plan. By Trump saying that news is fake and that any news against him is fake, he began the isolation of his followers from mainstream news that would highlight his failures and his flaws. But it goes beyond that. He made them believe that he is the only one that will present them with truth, and that his chosen sources, Fox News and OANN, are the only ones that will present them with truth. Beyond that, he has demonized outsiders. He has demonized their fellow American. See, Trump is a genius in this. He was able to create a perfect situation where he drew these people in. Then upon drawing them in, he made them reliant on him. And that moves to the next thing: keeping control. See, by isolating his followers and his cult from their friends, family, and reality, he keeps control over them. By him being the ultimate source of truth, the ultimate truth machine, he has made them incredibly reliant on him. Therefore, he keeps control. Trump was famously quoted as saying that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and he would not lose a vote. He was correct, because he has engaged that cult to be so needy on him that they ignore anything that would seem bad about him. The family that they had, the friends that they had, generally are pushed away, because the friends and family that they have attempt to try and break through, to try and provide reality. The cult cannot do it. The cult cannot understand it. The cult is told not to believe them. They're trying to stain you. They're trying to tarnish you. They're against me. They're against you. They're against us. Their fellow Americans become their enemy. Why? Because anyone that is not with us is against us. They're an enemy. You had things like QAnon, where we go one, we go all. These things are all part of forming the ultimate cult. So where do we go? What do we do? And how do we stop this? If you have a family member who's sucked up into the cult, how do you get them out of it? Well, it's tough. De-radicalization and removing people from a cult is something that has been studied and has not been perfected. There are ideas and methodologies on how to remove someone from a cult mentality, but it requires care, it requires calm, and it requires patience. See, the cult doesn't want to admit something. Trump's going to lose in November. Goes without saying. But the effects of the cult are going to be with us for years to come. See, this is where I'm concerned, and this is why I'm making this video, and this is why this video will probably be longer than previous ones. When Trump loses, the cult, the family, your friends, they are going to be distraught. They're going to be lost. They're not going to know what to do because their leader will not be there. Trump will drop them like he's dropped 2 wives already. Trump will drop them like he did money on a porn star. Doesn't mean anything to him. He doesn't care about his cult. They're there to make him feel better. Just like that with every cult leader. They're there to give him adoration. He doesn't care. So when he loses in November, we're going to be stuck dealing with the aftermath and the effects. So what do? We provide them a shoulder. We provide them care. We provide them comfort. We help to de-radicalize them, to help them see where the last 4 years of their life have been, where the things that they were screaming about weren't right, and how they need to understand that a change is needed. But see, it's us that needs to prepare for it. Those of us not in the cult have to prepare. Those of us not in the cult have to be ready to be there and to stand there. So prepare to be a voice of liberty and prepare to awaken the voice of liberty.